Congressman Matt Gaetz. Congressman, thank you for being here tonight to face some of this criticism. We thank you for coming in. So let's start with the tweet itself. What was your motivation? What did you hope to accomplish by tweeting that about Michael Cohen and girlfriends and his wife and his father-in-law?
Well, I think the clips you've showed from my statements on the floor and in other interviews reflected the context, but that doesn't excuse what I did that was wrong, and that's invoking someone's family. And so I want to say publicly what I've said privately to Michael Cohen and to his family, that I'm sorry if it is entirely appropriate to test the truthfulness of a witness, but that could have been done in a way that didn't invoke someone's family, and I shouldn't have done it.
What information did you have that caused you to write that tweet? Do you know something about him that other people don't know? I mean, obviously, you know, he's had his credibility issues. There's no doubt about it. But why the girlfriends? I mean, was that your idea, or some people have even suggested that President Trump wanted you to write all that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, to get into all of that would be to continue to reference someone's family, and I'm just not going to go there, Martha. But you are right that Isaac Dover of The Atlantic reported that I was on the phone outside the Longworth office building talking to President Trump, and someone did at that time overhear me say the words, "I was happy to do it for you, and you just keep killing it." Right. The problem, Martha, is I wasn't talking to Donald Trump. At 8:37 p.m., I got a phone call from Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis and I spoke for 13 minutes, and he was calling to thank me, not about Michael Cohen or payoffs to porn stars, but because I had made a recommendation to him for someone to serve on the Orlando Airport Board, a friend of mine named Randall Hunt. And Governor DeSantis said, "Well, I appreciate you doing that for me." I said, "Hey, Governor, I was happy to do it for you. You just keep killing it." And what's crazy is that even though Governor DeSantis told The Atlantic that he and I were on the phone, that we had that discussion, they still haven't issued a retraction or taken down their allegation, and it continues to be repeated across the mainstream media, in the Washington Examiner, in the Miami Herald. And so, look, I made a mistake. I should not have invoked someone's family, and I'm here to take responsibility and to say that I'm sorry. But when the media goes after President Trump, when they tell lies about me, when they repeat the lies that Jussie Smollett showed, it really enrages a lot of the forgotten men and women in this country who are tired of the media's all-out attack in the absence of facts. And we saw that again today. So I hope that Isaac Dover in The Atlantic will retract something that Governor DeSantis has already told them was false.
So you have proof that phone call at that time was between you and Governor DeSantis of Florida. So
absolutely.
Then we would expect that there should be a retraction. We would expect that there should be a retraction, and we'll see if you get it. At any time, did the president ever, encourage you to he was out of the country, and obviously the White House has said that they were very unhappy that hearing happened simultaneously with the North Korea meeting. Did he ever encourage you to mix it up a little bit on the Michael Cohen issue, or to show up at the oversight hearing, which you also tried to do?
Absolutely not. I spoke to the president before he left for Hanoi. We talked about completely unrelated matters, and I never spoke to the president when he was in Vietnam or the way back. Now, I'm not going to get in the business of talking to the media about every time I chat with my friend the president or every time we discuss advice or an issue before the country, but I certainly could tell you that there is false reporting about me. There is no proof. We live in a world now, Martha, where the media can report something that I was on the phone with the president. They can have no source, no witness, no identifiable person, and then in the echo chamber of the media, they just continue to report it despite the fact that it is a lie. It did not happen, and we ought to have better journalistic integrity than that.
All right, let's talk about the investigations, because I know that you took down the tweet, you apologized for it, you spoke to Michael Cohen about it, correct?
Mm-hmm. I did.
And what was that conversation like?
I felt that in addition to apologizing publicly for invoking Michael Cohen's family, that I needed to apologize to him personally. And so I reached out to him. I told him I was sorry. He sent back a very gracious message to me, and I am grateful that he accepted my apology in the spirit that it was intended. In a raucous political discourse and in investigations, we can disagree about substance. We can look for ways to expose inconsistent statements, but we can do that without invoking family. And look, Martha, the reason your network has me on a lot is because I'm one of the leading voices defending the president. This was an error on my part, but my errors are not errors of omission. They're errors of commission, where I do a little too much, fight a little too hard, and this time I crossed the line, and I hope that it's a better sign of valor that I'm willing to admit that.
Well, I think everybody can appreciate that. And I think it's right that you reached out to Michael Cohen. It doesn't really matter what I think about it, but, I think that most people would say that that's the right thing to do. What about the Florida Bar Association? They say that if the rules were violated, because obviously you are well aware of the rules of witness intimidation and how it works in the law, they say they will vigorously pursue discipline against you if their investigation shows that you were trying to intimidate a witness.
I have not heard from the Florida Bar. If I do, I will respond. But I think it's a real problem for state bar associations to be second-guessing the legislative conduct of members of Congress. I mean, like when Kamala Harris was saying terrible things about Brett Kavanaugh, both inside and outside the halls of Congress, like should the California Bar investigate her for conduct that brings disfavor or puts the profession of the practice of law in a bad light? They didn't do that. They shouldn't do that. And so, look, I'll deal with the Florida Bar if they send me a notification. But like just the fact that they are responding to allegations against me doesn't mean that there's any violation of the rules. Well, if any person makes any allegation, they're obligated to look into it.
The House Ethics Committee is also considering looking into it as well. But we appreciate you coming here and answering the questions tonight, Congressman Gaetz.
Yeah, the House Ethics Committee, they've got a bad record of sort of going after a lot of the president's defenders. They opened up an investigation into Devin Nunes. That turned out to be bogus charges. They've opened an investigation into Mark Meadows. That turned out to be something that wasn't his fault. And so it seems as though the people who defend the president most vigorously do spend their time in the barrel at the Ethics Committee. So I guess it's my turn.
All right. Thank you very much, Congressman Gaetz. Good to see you tonight.
Thank you, Martha.
Thank you, sir. Coming up next, breaking news on the defamation suit filed by the family of a Covington Catholic high school student against the Washington Post. Stick around. That is next.
I switched to Liberty Mutual because they let me customize my insurance. And as a fitness junkie, I customize everything, like my bike and my calves.
Liberty Mutual customizes your car insurance so you only pay for what you need.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
Oh, I never paid that for a hotel.
Well, how'd you do it then?
Yes. How? With Trivago, you can search for the hotel you want. Select the dates, and Trivago will compare the prices for that hotel from hundreds of websites worldwide to find the ideal hotel for you. Hotel Trivago.
To those with diabetes, mealtime is really time to think about insulin. When do I prepare? Where do I inject? But Afrezza lets you inhale your insulin when food arrives, even unexpectedly. So you can be spontaneous and not rely solely on injections.
Afrezza is a rapid-acting inhaled insulin used to control adult diabetes. Afrezza can cause serious side effects, including sudden lung problems and low potassium. Afrezza is not for patients with chronic lung disease such as asthma or COPD. Tell your doctor if you smoke, recently stopped smoking, have ever had kidney or liver problems, a history of lung cancer, or if you are pregnant or breastfeeding. Most common side effects are low blood sugar, cough, and sore throat. Severe low blood sugar can be fatal. Do not replace long-acting insulin with Afrezza. Afrezza is not for use to treat diabetic ketoacidosis. Do not take Afrezza if you are allergic to insulin. Talk to your doctor before changing your Afrezza dose. Blood sugar may need to be checked more frequently.
Ask your doctor if Afrezza inhalable insulin is right for you. Patients with commercial insurance may pay as little as $15. For more information, go to Afrezza.com.
In an era of online retail where everything is just a few clicks away, buying a car should be no different. That's why at Carvana, you can buy a car 100% online. We made it easy to browse, view, and buy from over 10,000 cars. You can even trade in your old car, all while binge watching your favorite TV show. Afterwards, we'll deliver your car to you. Or you can pick it up from one of our car vending machines. Either way, your car comes with a 7-day return policy. So grab a seat, relax in your comfy pants, and enjoy the new way to buy a car at Carvana.
Alert tonight, the Washington Post, the outlet at the center of a defamation lawsuit that was filed by the family of Nicholas Sandmann, that young man, just posted what it is calling an editor's note in response to their coverage of that story. David Spunt has the breaking details tonight from Washington. David?
Hey, Martha, good evening. The Post just dropped this news within the last hour, certainly starting to make the headlines here in Washington and around the country. This was a big deal when it happened here in January. Nick Sandmann, a Kentucky Catholic high school student, turns out he was taunted by a group called the Black Israelites. Now, he was vilified in the media for allegedly taunting a Native American man. You can see right there. The Washington Post reported extensively on this. Sandmann's attorney announced they would actually sue the Post for defamation for $250 million. But as you say, the Washington Post, they have issued this editor's note. They say, quote, subsequent reporting a student's statement and additional video allow for a more complete assessment of what occurred, either contradicting or failing to confirm accounts provided in that story. Now, we do know that the Washington Post says, including that Native American activist Nathan Phillips was prevented by one student from moving on, and that his group has been taunted by the students in the lead up to the encounter, and the students were trying to investigate a conflict. Now, that is coming from the Washington Post tonight, a rare editor's note from them. We also have a response, Martha, from Sandman's attorney, who says, quote, "Too little, too late." The Washington Post doing this tonight. We'll continue to follow this story. Martha.
No doubt the lawyers working overtime on this Friday night trying to navigate that situation, which is not going away anytime soon, it appears, for the Washington Post. David, thank you very much.
You bet.
Coming up next tonight, Speaker Pelosi with this very strong message for the president.
Do the country a favor. Don't run.
The debate over whether that is appropriate from the Speaker of the House, next.
Class-leading power.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and others who have this message for President Trump.
If I were talking to President Trump, I would remind him that you are my president as well.
The people of the United States are looking for a leader that unites.
If I had to say something to Trump, I probably wouldn't say anything because I don't think that it's worth the extra attention.
Mr. President, do the country a favor. Don't run.
Here now, Kayleigh McEnany, the National Press Secretary for President Trump's 2020 campaign, and Rochelle Ritchie, a Democratic strategist and former Congressional Press Secretary for the House Democrats. Great people to have with us tonight. So, Kayleigh, Nancy is just scolding the president. She says, you know, do us all a favor. Do not run. Is there any chance of that happening?
No, there's zero chance of that happening. I can tell you the president is excited for this campaign. He's geared up. He's ready. And I'm sure Nancy Pelosi does not want him to run, because how can you argue against results, a soaring economy, wages growing at the fastest pace in 10 years, remedying our trade imbalances across the world? You can't argue against success. So that's a pretty pathetic message from Nancy Pelosi. She should spend less time palling around with a socialist and a congresswoman with anti-Semitic remarks and spend more time focusing on working with the president.
Rochelle, you know, is there anything that's inappropriate anymore these days? I mean, is that a professional comment to say about the president of the United States? You know, just do everyone a favor and don't run?
Well, look, I think that she was being very sarcastic. And as you said, I think this is just something that we're starting to see in our politics. I mean, the president is not innocent in some of the remarks that he's made about those on the left either. But what I will say about Pelosi is that maybe she's thinking that the president shouldn't run, considering that he's imploded the deficit. It's risen by 40%. He used the paychecks of our federal workers as a hostage because he didn't get his wall. So, yes, he's had some accomplishments, but at the same time, he's had a lot of failures. I mean, he kept millions of people off of health care alone. Prescription drugs were supposed to go down under this president. That hasn't happened. Instead, he's given tax cuts to pharmaceutical companies. So maybe that's the reason why she's saying he shouldn't run. And plus, let's look at what's happening with his base, which isn't really supporting him that much either.
Whoa, Kayleigh?
That is just incredibly untruthful, all that you just said. In fact, he's cleaned up the disaster that is Obamacare. In fact, it's under this president that for the first time we didn't see. Let me finish. I let you finish and share your litany of falsehoods. So for the first time, healthcare costs are leveled off under this president.
We let you say everything you wanted to say. Go ahead, Kayleigh.
Exactly. He's expanded choice in the healthcare market, no doubt about that. And you want to talk about his base? 93% support for this president, far higher than the support Obama had among Democrats or Clinton had among Democrats. Kayleigh. So you're entitled to your own opinion. You're not entitled to your own facts.
All right. I want to play another piece of this. You know, of course, they don't do these kinds of rock and roll tribute kind of pieces to your party, Kayleigh, but they do them a lot for Democrats. So let's play a little bit more of this. It's kind of interesting. Watch.
My advice for young women, and I think just all women, is that we don't have to hem ourselves in. We don't have to make ourselves seem acceptable.
You never wait for an invitation or ask permission to step into your power.
Be fearless and unapologetic about being your best you.
What you bring is very unique. Don't let anybody try to minimize the importance of what your experience is.
Kaylee, let me start with you on this one, and then we'll go to Rochelle. What do you think about that message for women?
Well, look, I think we can be us, to be bold, to be unabashed. I agree with that. But that being said, you know, there's such an effort here to court the female vote. But again, you can't argue with the president. Historic low unemployment for females across this country, empowering them. Ivanka, a champion for paid family leave. If they want to empower females, come over to the White House and work with Ivanka and make that a reality. So that's my message to Nancy Pelosi.
Rochelle?
You know, I think it's a great message, and I think that regardless of where you fall on the left or the right, it's a great message for all women. I think that, you know, Ivanka would support a message like that. Pelosi obviously supports a message like that. So I don't think this is an issue where we need to make it a partisan thing about Ivanka and come to the White House. That's just ridiculous.
You know, you wanted paid family leave. You have an option now. I haven't heard your party come into the table on it, on that or infrastructure or anything else you guys have asked for.
Well, your president right now has imploded the deficit some $40 billion. So maybe that's why there's nothing.
So if you want to talk
Obama's not running, Kaylee. You guys keep talking about Obama. He's not running.
No president has a good record on the deficit over the last, 4 to 5 presidential presidencies. So I think that's a pretty tough argument for anybody to make on behalf of any president at this point. So, ladies, we're going to leave it there. Thank you very much. Good to have both of you with us tonight.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Martha.
So coming up next, the recent comments from President Obama that have some saying he's starting to sound kind of like a conservative.
Let me say this. Like, if you are really confident about your financial situation, you probably are not going to be wearing an 8-pound chain around your neck.
Coaching means making tough choices.
Jim, you're in.
Former President Barack Obama recently giving young men advice at an event for My Brother's Keeper.
Let's face it, a lot of hip hop and rap music is built around me showing how I got more money than you. I can disrespect you and you can't do nothing about it. If you are really confident about your financial situation, you probably are not going to be wearing an 8-pound chain around your neck. If you are very confident about your sexuality, you don't have to have 8 women around you twerking.
So my next guest says that remarks like those make the former president sound like a conservative. He writes, quote, years of thinking of myself as a powerless victim of an unjust world went by before I had people in my life speak to me in the way Obama spoke to those young men in Oakland, as an iconoclast knocking down false idols. But a New York Times, op-ed says the former president is now part of problematic practices, writing this. Programs like My Brother's Keeper insist on making better versions of Trayvon Martin, the black victim, instead of asking how to stop creating people like George Zimmerman, the racist vigilante, rather than encouraging them to dismantle the systems that deepen wealth inequality. Mr. Obama tells black boys to tuck their chains. Here now, Jamil Javani, the author of Why Young Men, The Dangerous Allure of Violent Movements and What We Can Do About It, set to publish in May, and Richard Fowler, Senior Fellow for a New Leaders Council and a Fox News contributor. Of course, gentlemen, welcome. Thank you very much for being here tonight. So if that message, Jamil, is conservative, if that makes you think that former President Obama sounds like a conservative, what does that say about where Democrats are right now?
Well, what President Obama is doing is reminding young men that we believe in them and we have high expectations of them. And just because they encounter unfairness in the world doesn't mean they have to lower their own expectations of themselves and their own behavior. The Democratic Party, their leaders today, are not creating space for that kind of conversation. It's all about what's being done two people, and in this case, two young men of color. And it's about clinging on to narratives where young men of color are not the moral agents that we're focused on. We're focused on when they're victims, like in the hoax case of Jussie Smollett, but not focused on situations where they're both victims and perpetrators, where they are the moral agents determining what the outcomes are for their families, for their communities, for their neighborhoods, their cities. And that's why there's no space for that conversation in the Democratic Party today as I see it. So when President Obama is reminding young men, we expect big things from you. We don't expect you to lower yourself because of what other people think of you or do to you. That is a message that doesn't seem to have a home in the Democratic Party today.
But that is amazing to me, Richard. Do you agree with that?
I disagree with that, right? And here's why. We do expect greatness. I expect greatness from all of my cousins, from my friends, from everybody who I know in my community. But with that being said, when the odds are stacked against them, when you have public schools that are falling apart, when you have teachers that aren't properly funded, when you have lack of opportunity in their community, it's hard for you to overcome all those things, right? And I think that is the debate that we really need to be having in this country. How do we create a system where no matter what zip code you live in, you have access to a high quality public education? And if we could fix that problem where Democrats and Republicans can work together on that, then maybe, just maybe, we can have a conversation to ensure that black men can achieve at the same rate that white men do.
You know, I mean, I hear what you're saying. I think there's, a lot of discussion that can be had around that. But I think the message from President Obama is a little bit different than that. And, I do think back to what he said before he was president, which really put him on the political map in 2004, and I think made him really stand out. Watch this.
There is not a black America and a white America and Latino America and Asian America. There's the United States of America.
Jamil, that could be seen as a conservative message today. To suggest that there's not a black America and a white America is now a controversial thing to say.
That is exactly right. I mean, the idea of color blindness, right? The idea that morals are universal and they apply to all of us, and that what it means to be a good person is the same no matter how much money's in your pocket or what you look like. That's what we're fighting for. That's why when President Obama said that, I was excited, because I think that's a message that we need to be reminded of.
I think we all were. I think that was such a galvanizing message. But I think a lot of people, Richard, wondered where that message went over the course of President Obama's presidency. And Richard, what does it say that statement would now be considered very controversial?
I don't think that statement's controversial at all.
But Howard Schultz just said the other day that, that he was colorblind as a child, that he played with black children and white children and Hispanic children, and that it blew up extremely controversial.
I think the reason why Howard Schultz's comments blew up as extremely controversial is because he's the head of Starbucks, a company that shut down for a day to deal with racial insensitivity. When at one of their stores in Philadelphia, two men were arrested for showing up for a meeting because they happened to be African American. That's why he was condemned.
But the conversation went there for good reason, I guess. But the larger conversation, I think, is true. You think that comment, what President Obama said back in 2004, wouldn't get a lot of controversy today?
I will say that comment, and I don't think we'll get any controversy. I think the larger argument here, right, the underlying theory of the case is this: there is just one America. But when you peel back that onion, and what you find is that in some people are getting all the benefits and some people aren't. And what you've created is an unbalanced you've created an unleveled playing field. And what we've got to do, if we really believe in one America, and I believe in it, we've got to fight to ensure that we have a balanced playing field for everybody. And this goes beyond race. This also deals with zip code. When I use zip code specifically because rural America has a different reality than urban America.
That's right.
Suburban America has a different reality.
People of all colors have challenges in their lives that they have to deal with.
But here's what we've got to do as a country is in the places where everybody gets the same amount of funding, in the things that we do as a country, we all believe that children should get a great K-12 education.
Yep.
That should be the same no matter what state you live in, no matter where you live, no matter your zip code, no matter your race, no matter your orientation. And that's the battle.
Jamil, give me just a 10-second closing thought, Jamil, before we go.
Well, where Richard and I might depart is that I think all of that's true, but before all those things happen, that doesn't mean we get to make excuses about hurting each other and hurting ourselves. We still have to be the best person we can be, and we don't need to wait for all those big picture things to change in order for that to be the case.
We'll continue the conversation. Thank you very much to you both.
Good to see you, Martha.
Coming up next, #MeToo catches up to Michael Jackson. 2 of his alleged victims say that his day of reckoning has finally come. Geraldo Rivera, who called himself one of Jackson's friends, joins me next.
There's no thoughts of this is wrong or anything like that.
He told me if they ever found out what we were doing, he and I would go to jail for the rest of our lives.
It was a fantasy.
The upcoming HBO documentary Leaving Neverland, shining new light on sexual abuse allegations against the man known as the King of Pop. 2 men who accuse Michael Jackson of abusing them when they were just young boys. They are now speaking out 10 years after his death, and it has some rethinking the place of the musical icon in an era of Me Too. Trace Gallagher live in our West Coast newsroom with the backstory tonight. Trace?
Martha, this documentary has very graphic allegations of abuse, and the accusations made by Wade Robson, who's now 36, and James Safechuck, now 41, are quite similar. Both were befriended by Jackson when they were young boys, and both were brought to his Neverland ranch, where they claim the abuse began, first with light touching, then kissing, then with Jackson performing oral sex on them, and vice versa. Wade Robson claims his abuse went on for 7 years, but the men now say they were never frightened because Michael Jackson convinced them what they were doing was in the context of a close, loving relationship. Robson says he eventually pushed the memories away until he imagined Michael Jackson abusing his own son. Watch.
If I never had a son, I might still be in silence.
Really?
I think there's a really good chance. I had become so disconnected from myself as a little boy over the years through the process of kind of pushing all of this down, that I had no relationship with little Wade.
The men go on to say a, quote, machine of people helped cover up the abuse. But it's notable that in 1993, when another young boy named Jordan Chandler accused Michael Jackson of abusing him, both Robson and Safechuck denied that they had been molested. In fact, during Michael Jackson's 2005 criminal trial for sexual abuse, which I covered gavel to gavel, the testimony given by Wade Robson denying abuse was largely credited for Michael Jackson's acquittal. The Jackson family now says neither Robson nor Safechuck can be trusted. Watch.
It's all about money.
It's always been about money. I hate to say it when it's my uncle. It's almost like they see a blank check.
It's an old argument that they've used. They say it's just about the money. For me, the lawsuit was about fighting back for little James. You know, nobody fought for me as a kid, but I'm old enough now to fight for myself.
And Oprah Winfrey is now supporting and interviewing the accusers for her own special that was taped this week in New York before an audience of sexual abuse victims. That special will air on HBO and the OWN network after the documentary airs on Monday night. Remember, Oprah interviewed Michael Jackson live back in 1993. He told her the reason he surrounded himself with children is because he never had his own childhood. She didn't press him on it. He was accused of molesting other children just a few months later. Yeah. Martha.
Trace, thank you very much. Here now, Geraldo Rivera, Fox News correspondent at large and author of The Geraldo Show. Geraldo, good to have you with us tonight. You listened to those 2 young men.
Thank you, Martha.
Not young men anymore, but recounting some horrific experiences that they say they had at Neverland.
You know, Martha, this is the era where we have to believe the victims of abuse when they come forward. But I have to say, the thing about Wade Robson specifically, as Trace Gallagher accurately reported there, is that during the trial, he was adamant that Michael Jackson, despite the many hours they spent together, had never, not one time, molested him. So is he lying now or was he lying then? I cannot credit this, and I have to recall also the judge in his 2005 case, which I also covered, remarking how all of these victims, told their stories to the tabloids rather than to investigators. So to me, there's nothing new. It is graphic. The detail is very vivid, but it would also seem to me to be in their best interest to tell the most dramatic story possible. I would like to know the financial arrangements between these two young men and HBO, Martha.
I mean, it's so hard to reconcile, Geraldo. These stories are so disturbing. You look back at Michael Jackson's life, and, he was always surrounding himself with children everywhere he went. And when you look at the way that people who do abuse children, and, I'm just observing all of this as we watch this documentary and I listen to you, it was like grooming on steroids at Neverland. Candy, free candy, animals, your birthday party, the sleepover parties. It is so hard to discount their stories given everything that we've all seen over the years.
Amen to everything you just said, Martha, but I have spent I did spend quite a bit of time with Michael Jackson in Neverland, and also when he was in exile in the days leading up to that trial. He was frightened, he was paranoid, he didn't know who to trust. He had just been burned by Martin Bashir, the British journalist who ingratiated himself with Michael for 8 months and then devastated him with an expose that I thought was grotesquely unfair. Just because Michael Jackson is weird, and just because Neverland was this creation, this Disneyland-like creation, doesn't make him a molester. I don't know. All I know is that Robeson told a very vivid story in 2005, very convincing. It was because of his exculpatory testimony, I think, that Michael Jackson beat the 2005 rap,
I think you're right.
which I also think was the fabricated evidence.
Yeah,
and now he's changing the story. He tried to get a job. This is one important point. He tried to get a job.
I'm sorry, I think there's a little bit of a delay. There's so many Me Too stories along the same lines where people said that nothing happened, and then years later they come forward and say that now they have the strength to tell their story. I got to leave it there, but we're going to talk more about this because this is airing over the course of this weekend, and there's a huge musical about Michael Jackson that's coming to New York City next year, so this story is not going anywhere. Thank you very much. Good to see you tonight, Geraldo.
Thank you, Martha.
You bet. So coming up next, the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle, might ditch conventional norms when it comes to raising the next royal baby with a more fluid approach to gender, according to reports. So what exactly does that mean? Ladies' Night coming up next.